I needed to use a large language model in my latest project, Summarize Fast. Um, since running those models locally on your own servers is a very expensive process, I needed to use an API for this purpose. I had two candidates for this. Either I will be using the API of OpenAI, which I believe you are already familiar with, the founder or the provider of ChatGPT, or I will find another solution. And the other solution happened to be, in my case at least, TogetherAI. In case you are not familiar with TogetherAI yet, let me explain or introduce you what TogetherAI is doing. Here's the landing page of TogetherAI. And very shortly, they're saying that you can train, fine-tune, and run generative AI models faster, at lower cost, and at production scale. Okay, this is going to be cheaper to use, and I can also use their services in a commercial product. So initially, I decided to use their service in my product, but I still ended up using OpenAI at the end. And here in this video, I'm going to explain why. To be able to give you some context information, let me introduce you my product as well very shortly. So Summarize Fast is a product which is developed for recruiters in particular. If a recruiter needs to go through tens, maybe hundreds of resumes for a given job post, if the job is done manually, it's going to take quite a lot of time for the person. And it's going to be very difficult to be objective throughout the process. With the help of this tool, the recruiters will be able to summarize the strengths and weaknesses of the candidates for a given job post very quickly. And they will also get a matching score, which is calculated algorithmically. And the candidates at the end will be sorted based on the matching scores, from the best matching one to the worst matching one. So the idea with this tool is that it's going to help recruiters save quite a lot of time, because this process is going to go very quickly. But if the recruiter sits in front of the computer and waits for a long time for the process to be completed, it will indicate that my system is not really doing the job as expected. And one of the questions that pops up in my mind for this particular challenge is the rate limits. TogetherAI, if you actually look at their pricing structure and so on, you're going to see that they're actually cheaper. But it doesn't mean that they are cheaper from day one. Let me explain why. So if you actually Google the rate limits of OpenAI, you're going to end up at this site, and you're going to find a lot of information about the rate limits for different models and so on. And depending on how much money you spend, you end up in different tiers, as you see here. For example, if you only spend $5, then you are a tier 1 customer. If you end up spending $50, then you become a tier 2. After spending $100, you become tier 3, and so on. For each and every tier, you'll see that you have different rate limitations in terms of requests per minute and tokens per minute that you can spend in a given minute in particular. And if you also search for rate limits at TogetherAI, you're going to end up at this page where you can find the rate limitations for requests per minute, and tokens per minute, depending on the tier that you are in. Ending up in tier 2 requires spending $50 in both platforms. If you spend $50 at TogetherAI, then you become a tier 2 customer, which is also the case in the case of OpenAI, as you can see here. If you spend $50, you become a tier 2 customer. And if you spend $100, then you become a tier 3 customer in the case of TogetherAI. And it's the same thing for OpenAI as well. So in terms of, in which tier you end up, you need to spend equal amount of money. But the rate limits that you get after, spending $50 or $100 or $250 are not necessarily the same. So since I have a demanding product, which will be sending quite a lot of requests asynchronously to the large language model, in a very short time, in a minute, let's say, I'll be sending quite a lot of requests to the system, and I will also be consuming quite a lot of tokens. So let's say what my limitations are. Let's see what my limitations are in both systems and how profitable or non-profitable it is to use each of these systems. Let's say I spend $50 and end up being a tier 2 customer. As you can see here, these are the OpenAI specific numbers and rate limitations. And here we see the rate limitations specific to TogetherAI. If I end up spending $50, as mentioned, I'm going to be a tier 2 customer. And my request per minute limitation is going to be 5,000 in the case of OpenAI. And the same limitation is going to be 1,800 in the case of TogetherAI. Even if I spent equal amount of money in both systems, my rate limitation in the case of OpenAI is going to be 5,000, and in the case of TogetherAI, it's going to be only 1,800. So it is very small compared to what OpenAI is providing here. And in terms of tokens per minute, my rate limitation for tokens per minute is going to be 450,000 when using OpenAI, whereas the same limitation is going to be 250,000 when using TogetherAI. Yes, it is the case that per token or per request, let's say, I'll be spending a lot more money when using OpenAI. That is true. So with other words, I'll make my $50 finish a lot more quickly in the case of OpenAI. But to start with, I still need to pay quite a lot of money, a lot more money, to be able to get equal amount of or equal amount of rate limitation in the case of TogetherAI. For example, while my request per minute limitation is 5,000 after spending $50 only in the case of OpenAI, even after spending $100 and transitioning into a tier 3 group of customers, my request per minute limitation is still 3,000 in the case of TogetherAI. In tier 3, my request per minute limitation remains as 5,000, but it is still much bigger than what TogetherAI is providing. If I spend $250, then I become a tier 4 customers in both systems actually. But my request per minute limitation becomes 10,000 and my token per minute limitation becomes 2 million. And in the case of TogetherAI, my request per minute limitation remains at 4,500 and my tokens per minute limitation is still at 1 million only 50% of what I get at OpenAI. Yes, TogetherAI is cheaper, but their rate limitations are much smaller. And let's also have a look at the tier 5 to summarize everything. Let's say that I've spent $1,000 and my request per minute limitation is 10,000 while it remains at 6,000, and it will always be the case after that. There's no tier 6, 7 or 8 or anything like that. Tier 5 is the biggest tier that you can be in, and your request per minute limitation is going to remain as 6,000 in the case of TogetherAI, while the same limitation is going to be 10,000 while using OpenAI. And your token per minute limitation is going to be 30 million in the case of OpenAI, while it still remains at 2 million when using Together.ai. Even if it's cheaper, they're not really allowing you to utilize their service equally intensively. With other words, you can send up to 10,000 requests to the OpenAI when you are a tier 5 customer. In the case of TogetherAI, you're not going to be able to send more than 6,000 requests per minute, or maybe it happens to be the case that after sending, let's say, 2,000 requests, you will already consume your 2 million tokens per minute limitation, so that you won't be able to utilize it that much. So, and also another thing, since I've tested both systems here, I also recognize that the response times are quite different between these two systems as well. When you send a request to OpenAI's APIs, the amount of time that it takes to get an answer from API is much shorter compared to how much time it takes to get an answer when using TogetherAI. Which is also important in my case because my product that I've developed, Summarize Fast, is supposed to help my customers save quite a lot of time, so that the responses are supposed to come back very, very quickly as possible actually. And the responses are coming back a lot quicker in the case of OpenAI compared to TogetherAI. So for those two main reasons, one, rate limits are a big problem when using TogetherAI. And even if it's cheaper, you need to pay a lot more money in advance to be able to get higher rate limits at TogetherAI, which actually doesn't necessarily make it a cheaper solution. Maybe, it's going to take a lot of time for me to spend all that money and by, sending a lot of requests and stuff to their servers. But they want to get the money in advance, which is not really making them a cheaper solution, in my opinion. And even if OpenAI per token or per request, let's say, it happens to be a more expensive solution, but they are more generous with their rate limits. And the response time is much shorter compared to how it is right now when using TogetherAI. You shouldn't take this analysis as you shouldn't be using TogetherAI. It solely depends on your use case, I believe. And they are also providing quite a lot of other services, which is very good. And also, they make a lot of open source models available. I want to actually support the open source community, and I want to use or TogetherAI kind of solutions in the future as well. But due to the problems that I experienced regarding rate limitation and response times, I ended up using OpenAI's API. But there may be other use cases where it makes a lot more sense to use TogetherAI, and I'll be happy to hear your view on this topic as well. So please share your opinion down below, and I'm really interested in coming back and using TogetherAI service in the future, but not today, at least not in the case of Summarize Fast product that I've just developed. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.